Path of Exile 0.3 has been out for a while now, and I'm just about finished wrapping up my continued playing of it, in part due to some annoyances, and in part due to playing other stuff, while waiting for the next patch. 0.3 introduces a huge shift in the game and its gameplay. For starters, I will talk about the campaign changes. The biggest change is the removal of the cruel difficulty. Since the game's release, I was complaining constantly about cruel. Having to play through the entire campaign twice, just to get to maps, really did feel like a slog, especially since how gigantic each zone was. Yeah, I know that's how PoE 1 initially did it, and yes, I know that's how Diablo 2 does it, but that doesn't mean it's the ideal way to do it. But now in 0.3 that's gone. You just have to play through everything once, and then you reach maps. Great change. Makes the pacing feel much better and removes some of the sloggy vibes. Additionally, now there is Act 4. This is a brand new act which introduces the town of Kingsmarch, which we are familiar with from PoE 1, which is a neat little familiar scene. Act 4 has you sailing to various different islands at your own will, which really helps to differentiate it from the other acts and keep pacing fresh and exciting. It's a lot of beaches and coastal areas, but also one area in particular, the prison, has these really cool graphics where it's half underwater and there's waves washing over the screen flooding the prison, which just looks amazing, and is one of the most impressive areas in any ARPG I've ever seen. Act 4 has many new bosses, a notable one being Diamora, the mermaid boss. But still, many of these bosses are in the standard circular arena that we're accustomed to, but they're fun and engaging, and they serve their purpose. I won't get too hung up on describing every detail of Act 4, but it is a welcome addition to the game, and perhaps the second best act yet. It's better than Act 2 and 3. There is also these interlude acts, after Act 4. This is meant to be a placeholder until further acts are developed, but the interludes feel pretty in-depth and polished. You interact with it by these 3 panels on the map interface, where you teleport around to different encampments and do different various mini-quests. Since this is just apparently a placeholder, I won't say too much about it, but I didn't mind it and it didn't bore me, and again, it aided in a feeling of good pacing through the campaign, and it removed some of the slog feeling, although maybe it was a tad bit too long. And still, there is some sore spots. The end boss of the interlude, Asmati, was initially overtuned and just totally bullshit with constant super fast one-hits, so I died like 20 times to him. I finally beat him, but I woke up the next day, and to my surprise they patched it and fixed him and made him way easier. That was just annoying. It wasn't just me either, I saw many people die to this guy, initially. And still, the overall campaign player hour rewards are a bit of a chore to get. Like all the permanent bonuses you get, which are basically mandatory. Stuff like permanent resistance increases, maximum life, or the passive skills. It's not immediately clear at a glance which ones you have to do. I know you can look for the yellow skulls with the plus on the map to tell if you've done them or not, but sometimes it's buried in these sub-menu layers, and you have to click around and scroll around the map screen for far too long to determine if you have them all. Additionally, some of the display for them in the interludes was bugged, and it would lie to you and tell you that you had it completed when in fact you did not. Obtaining these quest rewards could be improved and made less tedious, either through a better interface where it's very obvious that you have them all, something like PoE 1/passives at least. And actually some of it gives me flashbacks of the annoying renown system in Diablo 4, in the sense of the tedium that you have to do it. It feels mandatory, but no one really likes doing it. I feel like some of these permanent buffs can be made more clear, or better work into the campaign. Still, it's just a nitpick. Something huge they introduced in 0.3 is a sprint feature. This is due to players saying the campaign felt like a slog, and it took too long. Sprint works first by dodging, then holding down the dodge button. Now I'm pretty mixed on the whole sprint thing. It feels like a massive shakeup in the fundamental gameplay. For instance, bosses were not designed around the fact that you can sprint at a moment's notice. This means that many bosses now feel trivial or out of place when you can just move so freely. But even more so, what ends up happening is you feel compelled to use sprint as much as possible, as it's just superior than not using it. So between every pack of monsters, you're dodge rolling, sprinting, and so on. It makes the game look a bit silly, and it further encourages roll spam. Frankly, I'm not even a huge fan of the dodge roll, and it feels like it was put into the game just to capitalize on some trend in gaming at the time, namely Elden Ring's success. In an ARPG, I'm still not convinced is appropriate, and actually can hinder the gameplay, feeling compelled to constantly use it. The fact that you have to dodge roll first, then to sprint, is just clunky and weird. I understand why they did it, because they don't want you sprinting nonstop, but it's not really success and doesn't work out that way. You end up sprinting nonstop anyway. And another way they tried to discourage you sprinting nonstop is by enemies knocking you down if you get hit while sprinting. This is just goofy and makes no sense. Why the hell would a warrior titan with stacks of plate armor trip and fall down because a little crab jumped at him? Then you're laying on the ground for 5 seconds, like that Family Guy meme.
Ah! 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 Ah!
This whole thing is just very questionable. In my opinion, it feels like yet another band-aid on the general zones of the game just being too damn big. I am torn on sprint. I half like it, I half dislike it. I like using it to traverse across empty areas, but also I don't like feeling compelled to use it all the time, especially in combat, because it's just so much faster to use it all the time. And then getting knocked down left and right is just annoying. I feel like it might have been a mistake to add it to the game overall. Ultimately, I'm just critical of all the things that are being added that feels like aiding symptoms rather than solving the root problem. Things like checkpoints and sprint feel like they're just addressing the symptoms, but they're not addressing the root issue. And anyway, I'm skeptical how the game will feel with all 6 acts. Because currently, it still takes players 30 plus hours to reach endgame, and the campaign isn't even finished yet. Doing this every 3 months may be too much, and the slog will definitely return. They will need to still drastically reduce the sizes of some of these areas, as they're still gigantic, and the checkpoint and sprint mechanics, again, just feel like band-aids. 0.3 also added a new league mechanic, Abyss, and thankfully it's not like the PoE 1 Abyss. Instead, here it's just some fissures on the ground, and when you walk over it, it spawns nearby enemies. No more chasing the Abyss back and forth throughout the map. Although it seems like many of these Abyss monsters do heavy chaos damage, so early in the campaign, especially playing as a warrior, it initially felt very jarring and disproportional to walk out of the beach and see one of these abysses and then get spammed by the whole screen blowing up with chaos damage. I mean, what the hell is that? I'm this level 5 warrior, and there's 100 abyss monsters spitting chaos damage at me, killing me instantly. It felt poorly balanced. Like, okay, it makes sense if you're ranged, but what are you supposed to do as a warrior at that stage? For the whole campaign, I mostly ignored abyssal depths, because it was nearly impossible to deal with. Getting close to these chaos-dealing abyss monsters was not an option, so it really boosts the feeling of the game just not being balanced around melee at all. Which, weirdly enough, again, I thought was one of the core points of making this game, to make melee feel rewarding and viable. Like I said, this abyss mechanic spawns dozens of monsters, which can be fun, but also is a bit head-scratching. They kept saying that they want to slow down PoE 2, they want to improve visual clarity, the point of the game is meaningful combat, this and that. But then the very next league, they put in this mechanic that blows up the whole screen with a mechanic that spawns so many monsters you can barely tell where your player is at. What are they thinking here? Are they just totally backpedaling on all of that meaningful combat stuff and their core philosophy? I guess so. The visual clarity even in the campaign can be a bit of a mess. These abyss monsters feel like something you'd see in PoE 1 with the amount of spam and graphical effects they spit out. I'm not necessarily complaining about it, I just want to know what their goal is going forward. If we're doing meaningful combat with nice visual clarity, then why are we putting this stuff in the game? It just sends too many mixed signals and makes you confused what the hell their vision of the game is. But besides that initial confusion, the new crafting system is a welcome change. Previously, you could barely do anything to craft. It was more like identifying with extra steps. But now, you have desecrations in the form of using various bones. These desecrations are basically revealing items with Jun from PoE 1. You put a hidden affix on an item, and then reveal it later, and get to pick one of 3 modifiers. It works well to add agency to the itemization, and coupled with omens, you can pretty deterministically craft good items. And even in the campaign, these are usable, because there's different tiers of bones that work on certain item levels. So low-level items have their own dedicated crafting items, so you don't feel like you're wasting good currency on low-level junk. Though there are some problems. For one, the crafting system works by hidden modifier tags. You cannot see these tags in-game, so every time you roll a new affix, it checks what tags are being used and occupied by, and that determines what you can get next. So really, the only reliable way to have agency in crafting is to pull up a third-party website, PoE2DB, and look at the hidden tags on there. This is annoying. This information should be intuitive and easy to see in-game. The developers have said one of the main goals of PoE2 is to make the systems more clear and intuitive. So I don't know why it still works like this and why you have to rely on third-party websites just to see valuable information, just to be informed on how to craft. But even worse are some of the omens, which work in conjunction with crafting. For instance, some of them will say, when you use this omen, your next craft will be a Ulaman modifier, or a Kurgle modifier, or an Amanamu modifier. Well, what the hell is a Ulaman modifier? There's no real way to check in-game. Again, it forces you to go to some third-party website and look up a list of possible affixes to have an informed decision on what you're even doing. This is bad. There should be no information that you have to look up outside of the game, especially when it comes to using basic items and basic crafting. There is another kind of issue with crafting. It's that it's almost too good, meaning in the endgame, it is massively more profitable to not even play the game and to just sit in your hideout and craft items than to blast maps. It's no contest. It's like 100,000 times better. People sit in their hideout and deterministically craft god-tier items and hoard all of the divines and mirrors, massively inflating the economy, making it so that anyone that wants to just map is feeling punished because they can't keep up. And even when they do find a divine, the prices are so inflated by these crafters that it still feels kind of bad. This is kind of a nitpick, as I'm sure the crafting will be toned down a bit in future patches, but this is just how it feels to me personally.
They've also reworked essences. Now you have different tiers of essences, and they work like regal orbs. They guarantee an affix. And also there's perfect essences, which remove a mod, but guarantee a very powerful mod. I think the essence rework is necessary and good, but the perfect essences have some problems, which I will address later, namely the plus to skills.
And finally, the whole idea of crafting mainly by using 50 different omens in your inventory is questionable, and I think sooner than later, it will be massively bloated, and we will have so many omens on our hands that it will be absurd. I like the omen system, but it needs to be refined and it should not get out of hand with item bloat. And I don't know if all of crafting should be centered around it. The state of build diversity in 0.3 is not good. The elephant in the room is Deadeye Lightning Arrow. Here you have a build which has it all. Insane movement speed, it blows up the screen and beyond in one click, it can afford to massively stack item rarity. On top of that, it also gets to ride a damn Roa. Okay, what? What game is this? Why is there a mount? Only for one class. And why is it also for the most OP class in the game? This is completely antithetical to everything GGG was saying about the purpose of PoE 2 and the philosophy behind this game. The Roa even gets something like 100% movement speed. This leaves you scratching your head even more piled on top of all the other stuff. Just what the hell is the state of Deadeye in this game? It's like they just took Deadeye straight from PoE 1 and plopped it down into PoE 2, and then gave it a mount additionally and did no further tweaks. It's just baffling game design. It's so OP and bad that at the beginning of the league, something like 50% of people were playing it. Now it's 40% of people still. The other class everyone is playing is Blood Mage. Now I don't have the most knowledge about this, as I only play Warrior, but Blood Mage used to suck. But now in 0.3 it's been buffed. But it's been buffed so much that allegedly it outclasses every other spellcaster. I have a friend that plays Stormweaver, and compared to Blood Mage, it's like it does everything worse. There's no point to play Stormweaver apparently. Blood Mage is the second most played character as of today. Beyond that, the other classes are mixed. Minions seem very powerful, but I've always kind of hated minions. Visual clutter out the ass, which makes the game look terrible. And being able to walk around and have bots kill everything for you is just lame to me. Still, I guess all power to the minion enjoyers. As for melee, it's in an okay spot, I guess. It's probably one of the more mediocre playstyles, but I just like the archetype. But the overall state of melee is still weird. There's still just warrior with maces, monk with staffs, and unarmed options for melee. The maces are very slow and clunky, and to make them feel good, you have to invest tons into attack speed, which is further punishment and wasted points with little reward for choosing melee. On top of that, there's still passives all over the tree that say reduced attack speed before taking them. Why is that still a thing? Just delete that reduced attack speed shit. Just the whole upside downside on the passives is just cringy. The main takeaway for the state of meta is just to note how two classes are very OP and unbalanced, which dominates a large portion of the builds, and especially melee is still kinda lacking. The most shocking, exciting, and amazing change, not just of 0.3, but perhaps all of Path of Exile history, is Asyncronous Trade. No longer do you have to message someone, wait for them to accept, go to their hideout, and trade with them all manually. Now you have Ange, a new NPC in your hideout, who list your gear for you, and people can go to the trade site and instantly teleport to your hideout and buy the gear from this NPC. What this does is mainly solve price fixing. No longer can people list dozens of false, low listing prices to drive down the price of items due to confusing noobs. Asynchronous trade has been an overwhelming success, and if 0.3 did anything right, it's this. There's almost no flaws. The only real gripes I have with it is not being able to bulk list things. You have to manually type in the price each time. And another gripe is that it's possible to scam. You can list 2 items, for example 1 heavy belt for 20 exalts, and right next to it, put an identical looking heavy belt for 20 divines. And if you aren't paying attention, and you're buying multiple things, like if you want to buy all the heavy belts he has, you can accidentally buy this scam 20 divine one and rid yourself of all your currency. I guess this could easily be solved by implementing into the game something like, if the purchase is bigger than 1 divine, have a prompt pop up and say, "Are you sure?" But for now, you just have to be very, very careful when buying multiple items from people. And in 0.3, defenses have been reworked. Armor now has a new affix called Armor also applies to elemental damage. This is due to previously, armor was pathetic and barely made a difference. It was clowned on by the community. GGG's solution was to try to make armor apply to elemental damage. The result is that it's mostly positive, and ends up working to fix some of the warrior's defenses. However, the scaling may be questionable. It only really starts to pay off and work after a huge amount of investment. If you only get a bit of this armor applies affix, it doesn't feel like it does anything. So in effect, you end up trying to get it on every piece of gear. And on the passive tree. It's sort of a mandatory stat, because without it, you have nothing else to go by. This is because there's still no life on the tree. Well, there's a tiny amount of pathetic life on the tree, like 3%. So the only real form of damage mitigation warrior has is to stack armor and elemental applies. Trying to stack life doesn't really work, as you will constantly be one hit, because even stacking as much life as you can try, you will quickly find yourself capping out around 4.5 to 5k life without spending hundreds of divines. This isn't enough to avoid one-shots and juiced mapping. Now the most baffling part is, if warrior gets no life on the tree, then why is there still insane amounts of energy shield all over the tree? They were saying they don't want to have mandatory feeling things on the passive tree, so that's why they removed life. If that's the case, but then what is all this energy shield still doing here? Energy shield is effectively just a giant life pool. And since it's so accessible on the passive tree, you have spellcasters walking around with 20k plus energy shield, while the supposedly tanky warrior has a measly 3k life. So really, the spellcasters are still the tankiest class in the game because of this. Just a really weird design choice, and I don't know why it's taking this long to rebalance it. You would think if you're going to play a big, bulky, super slow melee class, at least he would be the tankiest in the game, right? But no, he's not. Maybe after you finally invest a lot and reached 100,000 or 200,000 armor, he starts to compete, but the level of investment to equate to these wimpy spellcasters is mind-boggling why it works like this still. It's not uncommon to even see warriors run around with energy shield and waste points going for it on the tree because it's just that good. I don't think it should work like this. As for evasion, well, now they have deflection. This is an additional mitigation layer that was supposed to solve the problem of even after you have tons of evasion, you only need to get bad RNG once and fail a dodge to get one shot. So deflection is sort of a mitigation after that failed roll. Is it successful? I'm not the one to really say, as I don't play evasion characters, but I have heard people say that it only starts to make a meaningful difference after a huge amount of investment, and even still you see evasion characters run around with energy shield, because energy shield is still that much better. In 0.3, fundamental game design choices were made. No longer is there a delay when swapping weapons. This means that if you aren't using weapon swaps, you are factually having a worse character and losing out on power. Since you can assign skills to different weapon sets, when you use the skill on weapon set 2, it happens immediately. So you are compelled to have a second weapon, no matter what. Usually one for single target, and you are also compelled to utilize the weapon sets on the passive tree, according to each weapon. I don't know how I feel about this change. I'm not sure it was really necessary, and it just adds more bloat and needless complexity to each build, and punishes players that do not wish to engage with juggling multiple weapon sets. I feel like the reason they did it is because they want to push and encourage this combo playstyle, but in effect, it doesn't really work like this at all. All it does is make it so most of the time, you use one weapon for bosses and one for clearing, Honestly, I just don't know if I like the entire weapon set system. Even on the passive tree, the whole allocating points for each set is a confusing and annoying mess to deal with. I mean, I get how to do it, but it feels annoying more than satisfying to engage with. That's just how I personally feel about it. I didn't mind how it worked in PoE 1, but I don't know, maybe in time I'll come to appreciate this more. In addition to the weapon swap, support gem limitations have been removed. Previously, you could only use support gems one time across your whole build. Now, you can use the same support gem as much as you want in multiple different skill slots. Although each time, the stat cost goes up. This massively changes builds and gameplay. I'm also undecided how I feel about this. I would have liked to see where exactly they were going to go with their initial idea. Maybe they jumped the gun too soon changing this. It just seems like a lot of areas of the game's initial design philosophy are being backpedaled on, and the game is more and more becoming PoE 1 again. I'm not saying it's all negative feelings. I do enjoy the added experimentation with being able to use support gems as much as I want, but at the same time, I also wanted to see what new fresh designs and ideas they had and where it would go. And I am a little sad that these big new designs are being dropped so fast to go back to how things worked in PoE 1. Time will tell, I suppose. And 0.3 introduced Lineage support gems. These are kind of like uniques, but for gems. Many of them are in the core drop pool, but some of them are only obtainable through specific boss encounters. These gems can drastically change how a skill is used, far more than the usual support gems do. There's lots of them too, and it's pretty fascinating to dig through them and look at all the possible options. However, as of currently, the vast majority of them are seemingly worthless and provide little to no benefit for most players. Many of them are actually not even traded, they are so useless. And there is only select few that anyone seems to care about. The biggest one is added Lu's Bloodletting. It's almost like if you're playing an attack build and you're not utilizing this, it's almost like the build sucks in the vast majority of cases. This is because it gives you a massive physical damage boost. It gives you more physical damage for how much life you spend, and it makes your skill spend life instead of mana. You support it with gems that have a high multiplier, which makes you use more life, and now you are spending lots of life per attack. Now it's quite easy to get something like 100% to 200% extra physical damage. That's extra, not increased. It's absolutely bonkers. This alone can double or triple your overall damage. It's too good to be ignored. And indeed, over 85% of Titans, Warbringers, and Blood Mages are using it. Rigwald's Ferocity is another notable mention, as well as Rakita's Flow. Beyond that though, there's not much that really stands out as being too useful with these Lineage support gems. I get what they're going for with these gems. It's exciting to add a new kind of unique gem to the drop pool, but the current iteration is either extremely unbalanced or the flip side of being totally useless. There needs to be more middle ground. The skill tree has of course been changed up this time around, especially with the new defensive changes, such as armor also applies to elemental damage. And they did change Giant's Blood again. They made it so your strength only gives half life when you take Giant's Blood. But honestly, I don't really like that Giant's Blood is a thing in the first place. I think one-handed archetype and two-handed archetype should have a distinct core identity. Being able to take a notable where you can use a two-handed weapon and a shield just erodes identity like that. I think it's cool to have a distinct character that just uses two-handed weapons and not a shield. I would like if shields didn't feel mandatory, so I do appreciate the Giant's Blood rework, which sort of tries to make it so there's more of a downside of also using a shield, but still it's in a weird spot for me. But beyond that, at least for me, nothing immediately stands out as too noticeable on the passive tree. I played 0.1 extensively, and since then, I don't see anything else which really pops out to me as being new and exciting on the skill tree. Granted, again, I only play Warrior, so I can't comment authoritatively about the rest of the tree, but it's not like this big shakeup with tons of exciting changes. The skill tree still feels somewhat underwhelming overall. Far too much power instead comes from items. Take for example plus to skills. They have now introduced a trivially easy, deterministic way to guarantee +6 skills to weapons, for instance. Also, you can get +3 on your amulet and +2 on your gloves. What this means is the vast majority of your damage is not coming from your skill tree, but it's coming from getting as many of these plus skills as possible. And if your build doesn't have them, your build's probably shit. I think this is bad design and makes the skill tree feel not very impactful. I think it's fine to get like +2 skills on a weapon, maybe +3 on the super high end, but +6 for one essence, guaranteed? It's just silly. When I first saw a weapon with this, I was like, oh my god, this weapon is insane. And then I realize it's an essence that you can get on every weapon, guaranteed. It's just another baffling design choice. You can even dual wield 2 of these +6 weapons. Now you have +12 to all skills. Just what the fuck? That's not how it should be. Make the tree more exciting and meaningful, make leveling up feel good, and make items scale off of it, not the other way around, like this. Some items in the game currently feel almost mandatory to use, and if your build doesn't use them, then you're pretty much playing wrong. Which is weird, because GGG routinely says that their goal is to make it so nothing in the game feels mandatory. As I mentioned previously, one such item is Adaluz Bloodletting, and another item, at least for attack-based builds, is Constricting Command Helmet. This helmet just flat out seems to be the best in slot for virtually any build that does attacks with physical damage. The helmet is based around the surrounded mechanic, but it's possible to get a roll on the helmet such that you're always permanently counted as being surrounded. This means you can take all of the massively buffed surrounded nodes on the passive tree, and you permanently count as surrounded, even if there's 0 enemies near you. This is insane stuff, like 40% increased damage per small notable, 30% increased armor per small notable. These alone are better than the vast majority of large notables. And there's many of them. There's stuff like 25% attack speed, 10% movement speed, 2.5% regen, which is a huge amount, and so on. This makes it feel like if you aren't using this item, you are factually just worse off, which feels bad. And indeed, on PoE.ninja, the website for checking what people are playing, almost every warrior character past level 90, you see them constantly using this item. Another item that similarly feels almost mandatory, especially coupled with Adaluz Bloodletting, is the unique jewel, Undying Hate. And again, here we have the unintuitive, uninformative information that makes no sense unless you close the game and search a third-party source on what it means. Basically, it replaces an area of your passive tree with garbage small notables, but the main feature is it replaces a keystone with Sacrifice of Blood. This essentially makes it so the more life you spend with skills, the more life regen you get, and also, you do more damage. Since it makes your life skills cost 50% more, this works in conjunction with Adaluz Bloodletting. This one jewel massively increases your damage and sustain, so of course it feels mandatory for any build using physical damage on top of Adaluz Bloodletting. Not only that, but blood mages even more so get a huge benefit from it. So suffice to say, some items are just so OP that you would be a fool to not use them. That's unfortunate because it starts to make every build feel the same, and it makes you feel bad if you don't conform your character around them. The endgame in 0.3 initially wasn't all that different than previous leagues. There's a bunch of new maps that reuse the new campaign bosses, some new unique boss encounters, like those stormy areas around the Atlas, which to unlock, you run the nearby maps and activate some beacons. After doing this a few times, it opens up the new boss encounters. Doing these new encounters is how you access some of the new Lineage support gems. This is all fine. Some maps also have these new summoning circles. These are stones you click where you can spawn a random boss. This is also fine and a fun little addition to the maps. However, they totally reworked Waystone stats. Before, it was basically prefixes are good and suffixes are bad. Instead, now all the affixes increase difficulty and increase rewards. The increased reward is in the form of increased rarity on the maps and increased rare monsters, or additionally increased pack size. This is a welcome change, as the Waystones before did not feel great to roll, and you would just get punished without upsides. Also, the way you obtain Atlas points is changed too, for the better. Before, you could find pinnacle content, but not want to run it, because if you die, it's too punishing, as it would consume the item. Now, each league mechanic drops splinters, and at the Realm Gate, you can choose which tier of boss you want to encounter, and it consumes a corresponding amount of splinters. This is far less punishing, and actually encourages you to engage with the content, rather than just selling the boss items. Also, the Atlas skill tree is very underwhelming still. It feels like none of the league mechanics are very impactful. There's not much to really choose from, and all you end up doing is just picking all the quantity and explicit modifiers on the Atlas tree. As for stuff like Expedition, Breach, and the Wisps, well, it also doesn't feel good to spec into any of it either. And the fact that you can spec into all league mechanics at once means everyone kind of has the same tree, and it actually just makes the whole Atlas skill tree feel pointless and redundant. And honestly, I don't really like the fact that PoE 2 is just starting to have all the PoE 1 league mechanics ported over to it. It makes it feel like PoE 1.5
and that they're just using recycled content over and over. I would prefer if the game just had its own unique mechanics. Maybe it's too much to ask, but every time I see them port over another League mechanic from PoE 1, it's not really excitement, but oh man, can we just have like something new? I don't know.
That's the majority of the initial endgame changes, and while they are good, still the endgame was in a rough spot. This is because of towers. To actually juice your map and get meaningful loot, you would have to churn through numerous empty, dull, terrible maps, usually ignoring all of the enemies except the rare monsters, to complete the map as fast as possible, to move on to the next map, to travel closer and closer to the nearest tower. Sometimes you would do like 10 empty maps in a row before reaching a tower, and it just felt awful. Once you finally got to a tower, here you can put in tablets to juice up nearby maps with quantity, rarity, and other buffs to finally make them worth running in full. But that's not all. It's not enough to get one tower, you actually want to get a double tower overlap, or even 3 tower overlap. This is because you don't want to waste your good tablets and well-rolled maps on just one tower, when you can have 3 towers all buffing surrounding maps. This makes the travel problem even worse, and frankly the entire mapping experience at that point was still awful and not fun. However, to everyone's surprise, 2 weeks into the league, they dropped a surprise announcement. Towers gone. This was 0.3.1 patch. I guess they finally realized that their tower experiment isn't working out, and now the endgame is more and more looking like PoE 1 all over again. Now you can use tablets directly on any map to juice up each individual map. Towers only function to show you more of the atlas now, and they also drop a precursor tablet, which isn't really anything. There's not a huge incentive to do towers anymore, and they're kind of in an awkward spot, but it's still an improvement. And now, since you can no longer do the aforementioned multiple tower overlap, it means that effectively the ceiling of juice has gone down. Still, only the Giga min-max blasters were kind of doing that anyway. So what ended up happening is that the overall baseline, for most people, should feel better. Still, even though towers are gone, it's not like the concept of travel maps are gone entirely. To still get the most out of your map investment, you have to travel to cleansed zones. These are maps which appear after completing a corrupted nexus. After completing it, surrounded maps turn into cleansed maps. Cleansed maps have packs of monsters which have massive rarity increases. Rarity is the #1 way you farm currency in this game, as rarity affects better currency drops. So if you run your expensive juiced maps on non-cleansed areas, it's just a waste and feels bad. So you still have to do mindless, empty travel just to play the fun maps, which still is not great, even after removing towers. Another surprising and fundamental change in this 0.3.1 patch is how they again backpedaled on a unique PoE 2 design choice. No longer do you have to kill all the rares in the map to complete the map. The rare monster icons are even gone from the minimap now. Now it's just like PoE 1, to complete the map, you must kill the map boss. I don't mind this change, as it's exactly how it works in PoE 1, but again, it's weird how they keep going back on unique gameplay elements of PoE 2 to go back to mechanics just like PoE 1. I fear that before long, we will have a game that plays and looks exactly just like PoE 1. Then it's like, what was the point of even making this game? And still, the prospect of rolling and preparing maps is in a horrible state and is no fun at all, and is hugely a tedious chore. It's made even worse with the addition of the new Abyss modifiers and desecration, since the desecrations also apply to maps. What this means is to properly juice a map, you must fill it with exalted orbs, because each affix adds rewards, such as increased rarity. Then, you use an omen to give it even more rarity. Then, you desecrate it with the Abyss crafting items. Then, you take the map to the Well of Souls and reveal and pick one of the 3 modifiers. And you have to pick a modifier that ideally gives increased rarity or rare monsters. The problem is, once again, the game presents information in an uninformative, unintuitive bullshit way, to where the only way you can actually see what rewards you are picking is to close a game and go to an external website like PoE2DB. This is unacceptable. Far too many times this annoying, tedious issue comes up, and they repeatedly have stated they want PoE 2 to reduce this nonsense. So why does it still keep cropping up all over the place? I get it's in early access, but that's why you have to complain about this now and nip it in the bud before it gets further out of hand. Stop with the cryptic, obscure bullshit in this game. that requires you to seek third-party information just to play the game. It's bad and not fun. So once you roll your map, desecrate, omen, close the game, and search for the desecration rewards, you're still not done. You now have to hit it with a Delirium liquid. Yes, we're still not done preparing a single map. You add 3 of these liquids, and finally the map is prepared. Now you have to use it on a cleansed area. Once you finally mouse around the atlas, for God knows how long, you've found the cleansed area, you've put the map in, now you're finally ready to play a single map. Now imagine doing this 10 to 20 times, just to prepare maps and play the game. It's awful and needs to change, because every time I think about doing it, it feels like a chore, and I'd almost just rather log off and play something else. Also, there is still no search feature on the atlas. This is such a mandatory feature that not having it just feels so bad. Overall, the towers change is positive, and makes mapping feel less annoying, but still the endgame is far from being a very enjoyable experience for me. Not to mention how every time you're doing juiced maps, you basically have to use Delirium, and this means that your whole experience while mapping is that your game is desaturated and gray, and it makes the game very boring and ugly. I think they just need to make Delirium feel less mandatory and do something else with the screen effects. And also, removing the towers had an awkward effect on the economy. This is because they let people double dip the rewards. By this, I mean before the patch, which removed the towers, you could buff up the zones 3 times for huge rewards. And then after the patch dropped, these zones still existed, and you could buff it again with tablets. This means people who set up these double-dipped zones before the patch are able to farm massive rewards, inflating the prices of divines and currency for anyone else who has not set up this double-dip method. I don't know how else they could have handled this. They could have just made it so when the patch dropped, it undoes the previous tower buffs. I think that probably would have been preferable, because it's just too unfair to the people who did not use this almost exploit. Yeah, it's a bit of a nitpick, but in conjunction with the next point, it really starts to feel bad. The next point being Rarity Cringe, and the state of the economy and inflation in general. Perhaps the most glaring issue is rarity. Information has come out recently that basically if your character does not have 100% increased item rarity, your character sucks and won't drop meaningful loot or currency, period. This is because rarity, as I previously mentioned, applies to currency drops. It does not work like this in PoE 1, and for good reason. It also has been revealed that there is a massive benefit to reaching 150% increased item rarity on your character, but after that, there's huge diminishing returns. Every character, no matter what, if you are doing juiced maps, you want 150% rarity, or you simply will not get any meaningful loot. The difference is astronomical. The problem is, a vast majority of off-meta builds cannot really afford to comfortably drop many affixes on their gear to fit in 150% rarity. Doing so makes your character feel weak, squishy, and lame. Dropping tons of character power just to get some reasonable loot is not a satisfying gameplay experience. This comes back to the Deadeye and the state of build diversity. The Deadeye can comfortably afford to drop affixes on their gear and stack as much rarity as possible, since the build is so OP. What this means is not only are they the fastest, with the most screen clear, but also they tend to get the most loot. They ride around on their Roa, one-tapping the whole screen constantly, raining divines from the sky almost every map, and it's not uncommon to even see some of them with like 600% increased item rarity because of this unique quiver. Effectively, it kind of ruins the economy even worse for anyone that isn't able to do this, which is most builds. So the whole state of increased item rarity is indeed cringe, and it must change for the game coming forward if it wants a healthy economy and a more balanced gameplay for all characters. In my opinion, this kind of mechanic is unacceptable and unenjoyable. And honestly, nowadays, when I think about logging in to farm some maps, I'd rather just play something else, as currently the price of divines is like 700 exals, and it's like, why bother? I understand late in the league, very powerful gear is cheaper, so it doesn't matter much if divines are inflated, but when your next upgrade already costs a dozen divines or more, it's just not feasible anymore. And even when I did gimp my warrior and reach 130% rarity, it's not uncommon to play a handful of maps and get almost nothing in return, simply because you got bad RNG or something. This feels devastating because a well-rolled map costs something like 75 exalts, So losing almost 100 exalts, 10 maps in a row, it just feels like, what the hell am I doing this for? So the whole endgame mapping system is still just not very fun, and it feels discouraging overall. But there's hope on the horizon. 0.4 is coming up soon, and is notorious for saying it will finally do a total rework of the endgame. I can only hope many of my grievances are resolved then. But overall, this is what I thought about the current state of PoE 2. It was a very fun league, with many great changes, but also the endgame is still in a sore state, and I am not too compelled to keep grinding it in its current state. Oh yeah, and fix optimization please. What do you think about the current state of PoE 2? Leave your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed the video, give it a like and consider subscribing. See you later.